gallant American soldiers, these Ivy men of the 4th Infantry Division, were dealt a tough hand in the Vietnam War. It was their lot to draw the almost impenetrable jungle of the 2nd Corps area near the Cambodian border to face the elite regular North Vietnamese army. Assigned to a narrow corridor honeycombed with North Vietnamese units operating all the way from the Cambodian border to the coastal plain of South Vietnam, the courageous Ivy men carried the war to the enemy and faced him toe-to-toe for a slug-out that ended in triumph for the 4th Infantry Division and a greatly expanded area of influence for the 2nd Corps. This is the heroic story of the 4th Infantry Division in Vietnam. During 2 earlier wars, the 4th Division had built a solid tradition of courage and the capacity to overcome the enemy. Organized in 1917, the Ivy Division, so called because of the Roman numerals in its name, earned campaign streamers at the Marne, Chateau-Thierry, Saint-Mihiel, Verdun, and the Argonne Forest. In World War II, they spearheaded the drive along the Siegfried Line and were heavily engaged in the Battle of the Bulge. They were the first to smash ashore on Utah Beach. The first to set foot on German soil, and among the first to enter Paris. And now the 4th Division was in action again, this time in Vietnam. In the summer of 1966, more than 3,000 men of the U.S. 4th Infantry Division arrived in Qingyuan, on the coast of South Vietnam, to continue the American buildup in that beleaguered country. As the advance contingent stepped ashore, they were welcomed by the Vietnamese and by their commander, General William C. Westmoreland. They then boarded buses to the airstrip for the last leg of the journey to their base camp near Pleiku, within the 2nd Corps area, which was located between the Cambodian border to the west and the South China Sea. The 1st Cavalry was already established in a narrow corridor at An Khe, but seasoned North Vietnamese Army units in regimental size controlled the great bulk of the area. The Central Highlands, difficult terrain made up of jungle, mountains, and waterways with the highest incidence of malaria in Vietnam. This was the lot of the 4th Division. The division base was established at Dragon Mountain, renamed Camp Inari, after Lieutenant Mark S. Inari, the first Ivy officer to fall in Vietnam. The rainy season was just beginning, and operations were severely hampered. But neither the weather nor the harassing enemy could deter the Ivy men, who were determined to make the area their own. The engineers arrived with the division's advance party and quickly began to carve at the base of Dragon Mountain in what would soon become a city in the jungle. With security details always on alert against sudden attack, the men of the 4th cleared the area and established their quarters. Mortar-proof bunkers and fortifications were built. Metal runways were set down for aircraft landing strips. And roads were slashed through the jungle to keep convoys rolling and troops on the move. Within little more than a year, the Ivy Division base camp contained more than 900 buildings. The harsh countryside was peopled mostly by Montagnards, a nomadic people who slash and burn clearings in the forest, farm it for a time, then move on. Harassed and terrorized by the Viet Cong, these simple folk fell victims of a time and circumstance they could not fathom. A need to evacuate the Montagnards to safer areas became apparent as enemy activity increased around their villages. A program was evolved for the resettlement and care of the Montagnards. In each move, the entire village was lifted bodily, huts, belongings, and all, and transported to a more secure location. The men of the 4th Division helped to create a tight bond between the Montagnards and their country. Ivy men swept through the steaming jungle near the Cambodian border, seeking to block North Vietnamese regiments who periodically dashed across the border in hopes of a quick victory. Often, small units of Ivy men would suddenly clash with overwhelming numbers of the enemy, who pounced with swift ferocity. When the big guns of the 4th were called in for support, and the heavy lead began to fly, the North Vietnamese Army, the NVA, disengaged as quickly as they had appeared. In that autumn and winter of '66, the enemy were often able to elude our pursuing fighters. We hit them from the air. They were adept at camouflage and could only be flushed on the ground. But if that's what it took, the Ivy men were ready. They embarked on a series of search and clear missions to locate the enemy and to rout him. The big mobile guns continued to do their share in dispersing the enemy. In operations like this and similar actions in early '67, the powerful partnership of heavy mobile guns and Ivy infantry combined to pin down large enemy units and methodically beat them into the ground. Operation Sam Houston grew out of an attempt by the Viet Cong to interrupt work on a vital road being built from Pleiku to a special forces camp near the Cambodian border. The road building crew had been the target of numerous mortar attacks and the scene of violent firefights. Despite intelligence reports of a large mass of NVA units, elements of the 4th Division moved through difficult terrain to meet the elusive enemy. There were few landing zones in the dense jungle, and areas had to be cleared before resupply ships could bring in supplies and take out the sick or injured. This was the only physical link with the outside. Choppers were called in for all types of assignments. Top priority went to combat assault missions. To spot enemy concentrations under the umbrella of dense jungle foliage, light observation helicopters were used. Once they located the enemy, the light spotters called for their big brothers, the heavily armed Huey gunships. These choppers pack an impressive resource of firepower. The gunships strike quickly, with uncanny accuracy and formidable power. Their presence on the scene was welcomed by the ground troops below, who moved in quickly to exploit the gunship attack. For the NVA, this technique was a costly experience, resulting in a great loss of men, installations, and equipment. While their buddies hacked and beat their way through the thick jungle in the north, the 3rd Brigade of the 4th Division, working with the Vietnamese Army, was assigned to War Zone C along the southern waterways. In the winter of '67, this task force spearheaded the action in Operation Cedar Falls. Positioned along the southern sector of the Saigon River, a mechanized battalion of Ivy men was charged with a twofold mission: to engage in clear and hold operations along the river, and to block the escape route of fleeing Viet Cong. As so often happened in the course of their mission, Ivy men uncovered a rich cache of rice left behind by the VC, which was airlifted out for distribution to the South Vietnamese. Hard on the heels of Operation Cedar Falls came Operation Gaston, in which a battalion of Ivy men fought together with elements of the 25th Division. On one of their many sweeps deep in the jungle near Cambodia, they succeeded in taking a division-sized Viet Cong complex. At first, the Americans had met heavy resistance, but on the second day, they moved in and found that overnight, the enemy had abandoned the area. The complex was there to be taken. At the same time, within the 2nd Corps area, the 4th Division concentrated on expanding its area of influence. With determination and tenacity, they hit the enemy with tremendous firepower. Between contacts with the enemy, the existence of the 4th Division was characterized by long periods of watchful waiting, with time for relaxation. And time to do the hard work that needed doing.